are in the live now. You can go ahead.
Sorry?
We are in the live now.
You already started it?
Yeah, we are in the live now. You can go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So for certain questions, we had demarcated, please write down the reasons for these questions. I hope you've written those down. I thought we could take those up for discussion. And we can also take up any additional questions and doubts that you might have had while encountering the lectures or doing the assignments. So this will basically be an interactive discussion and doubt clearing session. So if you have questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or I would prefer if you did not type it in the chat box and unmuted and asked me, but if you can't unmute yourself and ask me, it's okay. You can type the question and we'll try to address it. It begins shortly. Ideally, depending on how many questions are there, we planned for an hour. If the session gets wrapped up earlier than that, we can close it before that as well. So yeah, we'll start in 2 minutes. Thank you. Okay, we'll begin now. I would just like to open the floor for any questions that might get us started. So if you have any pressing questions about the course or any of the lectures, you can type them out or unmute yourself and ask. So maybe we can address those questions in the first few minutes. Does anyone have any questions? Alfio, Gulshan, Malaya, Sandeep, four of you are online. Do you have any questions about the contents of the course or any of the lectures in particular? Okay. Okay, so ideally, I will run you through what our expectations were in each of the lectures, and we can then take it forward from there. Just a quick overview of the entire course itself. So essentially, we put this course together to sort of drive home the point about the importance of ethics in conjunction with technology and how we can begin to think about those things. So the first session that you'll see in week one is what is ethics? It's sort of a general overview of ethics. It's a very general introduction and it sort of gives you a historical overview of how ethics has been discussed and what the discourse around ethics has been in general, not specifically technology itself, which is why you have Professor Chetan talk about uh, Aquinas and Kant and morality and how it's different from ethics. And these are the kind of things that are discussed in the first lecture. In the second one, you have technology and ethics to do good or to do no harm. So when you think of technology and ethics specifically together, do we need something else? Do we need something more than just ethics? Are there other dilemmas that we need to address, especially when we're dealing with technology? That is sort of what gets discussed when Professor Bidisha sort of gives you an introduction of what technology and ethics can look like together when we think about them. And in centralized technology, localized services, you have a specific case study, which is a case of looking at technology as this very innovative solution that will solve all the problems that we currently face. And the case that's discussed by Professor Amit Prakash is the case of the public distribution system in Karnataka specifically. And what happens when there are exclusions in the PDS system, right? So that is what gets discussed there, and what are the ethical dilemmas that arise as a result. Then, if you've gone on to week two, which I presume you would have just sort of ventured into, you'll have the smart cities and equity, which is again taking up how technology becomes this beacon of hope, where you smartify everything in a city, where you tend to put surveillance cameras everywhere, you put sensors everywhere, but does that automatically make our cities more quote unquote livable? What does it mean? What does smart mean in smart cities? That is more critically explored. And Professor Balaji Parthasarathy talks about the different conceptions of smart cities and how each of it comes with its own sort of politics. Then you have the data or an anti-politics machine, where you more granularly start to think about the role of data and data collection. And you'll have Professor Janaki Srinivasan, who talks about surveillance and predictive analytics, and how if you feed bias, you have biased outcomes, and algorithms are not objective truths, but they're very much managed by certain people, because whatever goes in comes out as the decision that is taken by the algorithm. So this is roughly what you should have encountered so far. And I thought we could go over each of the assignments, but I can only do so in discussion with all of you. So for those of you who are here, are there any questions that you have within the assignments? There are some sections where we have specifically demarcated that you write down why you have chosen certain answers. Is there anything you'd like to say in that regard?
Ma'am, hello, ma'am.
Yes, hi.
Yeah, ma'am, can you please discuss those non-graded, assignment two questions, and can you, explain the reasons behind the answers to those questions? The
Assignment,
non-graded, yeah, non-graded assignment two questions are there, right?
non-graded assignment, two questions. 1 second. That's a
Yeah.
need to, right? Yeah, the practice assignment.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. So there are 5 questions here. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it that you would like to, all of them? I can discuss all of them if you want.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the first question in week, this is we're going to week two, assignment two, non-graded, all 5 questions. That's what we'll be discussing. The first question says a beneficiary arrives at a fair price shop. They are a construction laborer. In their first attempt, their biometric verification fails and they are denied access to Russia. The person then goes to the Aadhaar center to correct the error, if any. The correction is not registered. The FPS owner verifies their credentials with an old local database and hands their ration to them. And on account of not, and on account of knowing them, they hand their ration to them. What conclusion can you draw about the Aadhaar linkage to ration card from this scenario? Right. So the correct answer is here there is a local system adopted by the FPS owners and beneficiaries. And if you go back to the lecture that Professor Amit Prakash delivers on the PDS, you will see that there is a system of intermediaries that are available within the delivery system, right? Who are not captured under this larger system by the technology. Now, what do I mean by that? There are a bunch of people who are not recognized in the technology. Like, for example, your Aadhaar verification, when it happens, it does not sort of register under what circumstances the ration is being denied or granted. There is a whole host of intermediaries that make sure that the ration reaches people, even if there are errors. Like, for example, like this specific case talks about a construction laborer. Oftentimes, what happens with construction laborers is they do a lot of physical labor and they work a lot with their hands. So sometimes their biometrics fail. So time and again, they have to verify and authenticate that they are truly who they say they are, right? So the technology becomes a huge barrier during this process. So what happens if the technology becomes barrier? There are humans that step in to make sure that the system does not fail, does not fall apart. Those humans are intermediaries. And sometimes these fair price shop owners are intermediaries. But these intermediaries are often not recognized by the technological system that is meant to replace them. But they are as important to the system for it to function and keep going, if not crucial. And that's something that we're trying to say through this lecture. Now, what does this question specifically say? It says, what conclusion can you draw about the Aadhaar linkage? Now, the Aadhaar linkage to the ration card, specifically about that aspect, is the FPS owner in violation of the spirit of National Food Security Act? That's the first option. No, because National Food Security Act, the spirit of the act says that every citizen of India should be guaranteed food security. So the FPS owner is very much in accordance with the spirit of the National Food Security Act. Construction laborers need to rely on other modes of verification. But is that a conclusion you can draw from this? No, because there is no state governed other mode of verification that is available to anybody. So naturally, there will not be a separate mode of verification for construction laborers alone. So that's not a conclusion you can draw from this. So then what is the natural thing only that's left? There is a local system, because if the FPS owner, the fair price shop owner, had not known the beneficiary, they would probably have not granted them ration. But because this operates on personal network And because this operates on interpersonal trust, there is a local system that has already existed. More often than not, people who are getting the ration know their fair price shop owner and vice versa. So that's how we can conclude that there's a local system adopted by the FPS owners and the beneficiaries. Any questions in this? Just indicate in the chat if there are any.
No, ma'am, it's all right. I understood, ma'am.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, great. So we'll move on to the second question. The second question is sort of an analytical question. So you see, it's a word play actually. So if you see Professor Balaji Parthasarathy's lecture, you will encounter Saskia Sasen's reading and concepts being discussed in the lecture. Over there, Professor Parthasarathy invokes both a censored city and a censored city. Now, what's a censored? The first one, the one that starts with a C. What does it usually mean? We associate it with a censor board, like, for example, a film might get censored. So it's basically curbing somebody from saying something or expressing something. So that is censorship. That is censor with a C. But then the second kind starts with an S. That's sensor with an S. That is about sensory, sensing. You know how devices have sensors? That's more where that's coming from. So, what is the answer here? Censored city means technology in command, which means technology is a decision maker where in the context of where this concept is being invoked in the lecture, you can see that there the professor talks about censored city in the context of technology surveilling and actively taking decisions to censor things. So there, the technology becomes a decisive force, which is why you're saying technology is in command there. But what about censored city? Censored city is you line the city, for example, just run with my imagination here. You line the city with sensors, then they become tools for you to examine who's coming, who's going, to detect anything. So it depends on who is in power. But the technology becomes a tool. It is not really taking any decision per se. It is giving you input in the form of some kind of data point, saying this is the latitude, this is the longitude, whatever sensors you might deploy them for, right? So that's where this difference comes in. So one of them is instrumental. It's like an instrument. It has a tool logic to it where you use it, but the ultimate decision rests with the human. But in a censored city, the technology usually has some level of automation in it. So there is a decisive force behind the technology. And that's why the technology becomes in command. Like take, for example, as you would have seen in Professor Janaki Srinivasan's lecture, there is this talk of predpol. So you can think of predictive policing using facial recognition software as an example of a censored city. So that was for the second one. Any questions on the second one?
Yeah, it's all right, ma'am.
The third one, okay, I'll quickly go through third, fourth, and fifth because the third one is fairly easy. It's development with dignity. So what you have to think about is look at the options. Having the same technology adaptation in all places to ensure equality. Equality does not equal to dignity. I can have the same tool as someone else, but have a harrowing experience using it, right? So let's take the first questions example. The construction worker, time and again, when you have to prove that you are who you are, it strips away at your dignity. You have to keep getting, you keep getting rejected by a machine to gain something that is otherwise a fundamental entitlement to you, like for example, your ration, which is it's something that you're entitled to. And if a machine rejects you, it sort of chips away at your dignity one by one a machine rejecting a person, right? So think of that. That is a stripping away of certain dignity. Now, let's look at that in coherence with the options that are presented to us. What can we relate to that experience? Having the same technology adaptation, that's what happens. You have the biometric everywhere in PDS, but does everyone experience it the same way? Does everyone experience a dignified output? No, that does not happen. So the first option is not correct. The third one, recognition of citizenship by extensive digitization. We can see here that digitization, and I hope you would have gotten the drift of the lectures, is that digitization does not guarantee any kind of rights or entitlements. Digitization is merely a mode of public service delivery. So what we're at least trying to, which I hope you would have gotten, is that we're trying to say that digitization of anything comes with its own set of ethical challenges, and that's what we're looking at through these. So since digitization by itself cannot be a guarantee or a beacon of hope that magically sort of grants someone all the rights and entitlements that come with citizenship, the third one also cannot be given. Enabling participatory decision making. What does that mean? If all the socioeconomic backgrounds had a say in how biometric authentication had to be done or how digitization had to be delivered, the output would have been very different. Some sections of the society today don't undergo any stress, don't undergo any problem while encountering these technology, but there are some sections that encounter problems time and again, which hints to the fact that perhaps these technologies were not participatory to begin with. So that's why development with dignity in the context of these three options that are presented to us is closest to enabling participatory decision making, so that the experience of having access to welfare service delivery does not become undermining. How can you make sure that that is the case? By enabling participation. Now, the next question, the Gift Cities initiative is reflective of. The Gift City is something you will encounter in the Smart City lecture. I hope you've gone through it. Here, you will see that you would have ideally seen Professor Balaji talk about it a little bit. And you can see that the way that it is designed, it's like a plug-and-play model. Right? What do I mean by plug-and-play? You kind of see that something works somewhere else, and then you try to implement that in a context that's far removed from that reality. And that's what's happened even in some of the examples that Professor Balaji gives in his lecture. So the Gift City is really an attempt at establishing order in the city-state, because they really try to, build tall skyscrapers and have really ordered landscapes. But the way that India is, and the way that our people are, and the way that our socioeconomic and political realities are, that our idea of order needs to come from local reality. It should not be somewhere else's idea of order being superimposed on this our cities. So that's when it tends to work for some and not work for many. So what really happens in the Gift City design is that it inhibits human agency a lot. What do you mean by human agency? It's mostly related to human free will. At the risk of oversimplifying, I will say that it's related to human free will. For example, it's a very technocentric approach to designing your cities, right? Where does the human fit into such a city? That's something that you have to think about. Does it really enhance the user city interface? It makes it overly dependent on technological and Western ideas of what a good city is. But unfortunately, that idea has to come from local realities. So that's why it inhibits human agency, because it's not reflective of the social, the political, and the economic realities of India. Now, what was said to be extensively used in Lekru? This is a recall question. If you've gone through it, you should have been able to figure out that it was reinforced concrete, which was a pretty new discovery back then when he was designing the city for 3 million. Yeah, so that's about it with the um, non-graded assignments. Any other questions within this? I'm happy to take them up. Okay, so there were certain questions in the first assignment where we had sort of hinted that you would have to write down the answers, reasons for these, for your choice, right? So I'll just pick them up. Yes, question number 10 in the first assignment. You have a pen pal with whom you communicate via email in English. You decide to write to them using only memes one day and they don't write back. Is this an example of technology as a cultural phenomenon? What is the answer that you all wrote, if you remember, that is? And I hope you've written down why you wrote a certain answer. If so, we could discuss that right now. This is question number 10 in assignment number 1, graded assignment number 1. Anybody? I'll paste the question in the chat box and you can have a look at it again. You can tell me what it is that you wrote. And then we can take it up for discussion. You can also type it in the chat box if that suits better. I think no questions in this question. Everybody got it right? Okay, I'll quickly explain this to you. So ideally, why should you choose the correct answer? But can anyone tell me what the correct answer to this might be? Exactly, perfect. Thank you for that. So you communicating in memes is not a technological difference. If you were communicating via a phone, or let's say you suddenly write to them on Facebook, that becomes a technology, right? But if you're communicating through comics or memes, that's not a technological difference. That is a cultural difference, right? So then you can't have technology as a cultural phenomenon here because the technology is not the point of difference. So perfect. I'm glad that some of you were able to pick that up. Any questions in this? If not, I'll move forward. Okay. So we'll go to week 2, assignment 2. Okay, you're still doing assignment 2, is it? Because I
Yes,
don't want to. Yeah, okay. Then maybe best I don't discuss that when we can go back to assignment 1, actually. Yeah. So in assignment 1, you see the longer questions. We'll take up the longer questions. Okay. So suppose you ask your supervisor for a 3-day extension, citing that a family member is in the hospital. However, there is no such family member in the hospital, but you wish to be there for a friend who is going through a rough time emotionally. Does this pass Kant's universality maxim? What is universality maxim according to Kant? Can someone discuss that? Does anyone have any questions related to that? So Kant's universality maxim is that actions should be able to be universalized, meaning that it should ideally be applied by everyone without any contradiction. Now, Kant says when you act only in accordance with this maxim, that has to be that where your act of good, quote unquote good, can be universalized, only then will it be a universality. Only then will it be in accordance with the universality maxim. Now, what is happening here? Can somebody tell me?
ma'am, what was the question here?
This is question number 5. Suppose you ask your supervisor for a 3-day extension. That's the question. Can someone tell me what the correct answer is and why it is so? Nobody? You can type it in the chat also if that suits you better. Okay. No is the correct answer. Why do you think so? Anybody? Can anyone tell me what was Kant's universality maxim? Okay. So you will be able to see this in Professor Chetan's lecture where he talks about the universal law formula. What we're really asking is if this is in accordance with the universal law formula. What is the maxim here? The maxim is that if somebody applies for leave, they will, this is again going off of the example that if somebody borrows money, they usually promise to pay it back even though they are not aware of whether or not they might be in a situation where they will be able to pay it back. That is the example that Kant gives. So let's try to apply this to what we have here. Okay. So here we have somebody who is trying to apply, take off from work or get an extension, stating that there is a family member in the hospital. So the reason that they have stated is one, something else. But what is actually happening behind the scenes, it's another reality altogether. So there is a very deliberate sort of misrepresentation of somebody's reality. But this is what people in popular language or popular vocabulary would call a white lie, right? Of course, we need to know more about the situation to be able to say that it is definitely a white lie. So it straight away does not stand in accordance with the universality of this maxim, right? We don't know if this is how everyone who is asking for an extension, citing a reason, is representing their reality. Correct? So there is a contradiction to the universalization here. And that is why it is not in accordance to the universality formula. Yes. An action that must take place every time a certain situation arises. For example, if a universal law was that you should never tell a lie, you must never tell a lie, even if telling a lie might save your life. Lie in that situation would be a violation of the universal. So correct. And in this, in the case of Kant, he uses this thing called a maxim. A maxim, what is a maxim according to Kant? He's saying a maxim is the underlying principle of an act, right? So your underlying principle of lying to your, or saying or asking for an extension is to be there for your friend. But the reason that you're citing is quite different. So it does not hold true because it seems like the situation cannot be universalized, right? So since it's in contradiction, it does not stay true to the universal law formula. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Was that clear? Any questions?
It's okay, ma'am.
Okay. According to affordance theory is something. So affordances are features or attributes of certain technology that tell you how to interact with the technology. Like, for example, you know that an X at the top right corner means you're going to close the tab. You have come to learn that, correct? And as soon as you go hover on that X, it glows up in red or in blue or whatever color you programmed it to be, which means that it tells you how to interact with it. So let's take up these examples. Affordances are an explicit affordance Affordances are of different types. One of them is an explicit affordance, which is a type of affordance that elicits a specific answer, a specific action. Which among these is an example? A door without a pull or a push sign. A door without a pull or a push, it tells you exactly, does it tell you exactly which way to open the door? No, it does not. So it's not explicit at all. You can open the door in any way. A speaker image to increase the volume. Does a speaker image with an arrow, upward arrow, might tell you that it stands for increase in volume. But just the speaker image might just tell you that it stands for volume, right? So it might not even convey whether it's volume up or volume down. A prompt on a website that says click this to proceed, that seems very explicit. It is telling you exactly how you have to interact with it, right? So you have to click it to proceed to the next page or the next link. So that is very explicit. A green button to show someone is online. That is something that you have taught yourself over time. That green means online, red means offline. These are colors that we have come to associate over time, over multiple platforms, but it's not explicit. So when a prompt on the correct answer is 3, a prompt on a website that says click to proceed. Okay. I think the affordance question is very clear, so I will not spend much time on that. So there are 2 industrial townships that require a good road network. However, you have funds only sufficient enough to completely build roads for one of the 2 townships. Town B has 2,500 more residents than Town A. You decide to go with Township B as the choice. According to which philosophical framework would your decision be correct? The correct answer here is utilitarianism. Why? Can someone tell me what utilitarianism is? Utilitarianism is essentially saying that you're going to do something that benefits the most number of people. That is how you are choosing to look at it, right? Now, benefit of the majority is happening in which township? Is it going to be Township A or Township B? It's going to be Township B, simply because it has 2,500 more residents than Township A. So, according to utilitarianism is a good lens to sort of back up your decision, saying when I build the road network in Township B, it will benefit more number of people. So I have taken a utilitarian approach to deciding which township to build the road in. So that's the answer. Okay. You feel guilty about having stolen money from your mother for helping a friend who was in debt. Which part, according to Freud, is responsible for this guilt? Now, all 3 options are different parts of your identity. You have the superego, you have the id, and then you have the ego, right? So you have the ego, which is the reality of the situation, which does not tell you anything about, assigns no judgment value, nothing. You have the id that sort of instructs, right? It has basic instincts. Like, for example, if something is hot, your id informs you. The brain sort of takes a decision that, okay, this is hot, right? And let's say your directions, choosing whether to go left or right. That's something that your id instructs. Your basic instincts come from id. But your superego, that's where your morals and ethical conundrums really come from. So your superego part of the brain is responsible for, oh my God, I have been taught, I have been morally conditioned to think of stealing as wrong. And because I think that this is wrong, I realize that this is not an action that I should have done. And because I had gone ahead and done it, I feel a certain sense of guilt. So your superego sort of compares your action to what you think is right or wrong, and then invokes a certain feeling accordingly. So that's the superego is the correct answer for that question. Ninth question is sort of like a direct recall, so I will not discuss that. But if anybody has any questions, I am happy to dive in. Yeah, I think we have fairly covered almost all the concepts that you might have faced some sort of confusion in, but I'm reachable over the discussion forum also. If anybody wants to take up anything, we can discuss some examples. And if you have questions, please feel free to post there because we probably won't have a live session for another week or so. So in the meantime, if you have questions, please post on the discussion forum. And if you have any questions for me right now, I'm happy to take them.
Yeah, I don't have any question, ma'am, right now, but the way you have explained, actually, you have simplified the, I mean, the whole concept of the answer to all these, questions. I mean, I could really, understood the meaning of the questions and also the terms which are associated with the answer to those questions. Thank you for that, ma'am.
No problem, no problem. It's my job, really. So I'm happy to see that, something I said is not totally lost on you. So I would be happy to take up more such examples. And even if you don't understand something I say, because I also sometimes it is possible that, I may continue with the vocabulary of the lectures itself. And sometimes you really need to break them down because some of these terms are harder to understand. So if you have any difficulty, if any of you are facing any difficulty, please feel free to write to me and I will try to give everyday examples. And as you go ahead, the last two modules, right, are about AI, which are even more relevant to how we should think about technology today, because AI is very much part of our reality right now, right? So I hope these questions are not just something that you get right, but also are forcing you to think about the current world that we live in. And that's more our objective with the course anyway. And regarding the reading material, so there's a lot of reading material that the lecturers and the professors sort of hint at. I just wanted to clarify if you are all able to maybe refer to them if you have any interest, or if you want to look at what specific case studies are being discussed, you can always refer to them. But I think I should take that over the discussion forum. So I'll post a separate announcement for that. Yeah, I'll stick around for another 5 minutes. If somebody has any other questions, I'm happy to address them. And yeah, thank you so much, all of you, for joining in.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ma'am, ma'am,
Yes,
hello, ma'am. Can you please explain the question number 3 of assignment 1?
question number 3 is it?
3, yeah, it is about ChatGPT.
Yes, okay. ChatGPT will be responsible for changing how we perform surgeries. Now, for this, you have to look at Professor Bidisha Chaudhary's lecture. You know that there are 4 axes, right, that she draws. Let me see if I can project that while talking about it. So Professor Bidisha talks about instrumentalism, voluntarism, substantivism, and determinism, and how these are actually 4 ends or different axes of 2 different axes. Are you able to see my screen?
No, like it's only T8 words and that the subject is only there.
Okay, one second. Now?
I
You should be
think
able to
it
see
will
it.
come, but it hasn't come till now. Yeah, now it's there. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So if you see, all of the 4 options that are given in the question are the same as this. Now, and if you see right below the terms, there is a short definition of these terms. Substantivism is technologies shape society. Instrumentalism is technological artifacts are neutral tools passively to be used by humans. Okay? Determinism is technological development is determined by an inner logic. Now, what does an inner logic mean? Technology, like for example, it's like saying um 10 years from now, AI will take over half the jobs, right? That is a very blanket statement. How do we know that? We are just making a speculation based on our current reality of AI. We don't know what the regulation will be. We don't know what the so the statement is very deterministic. Saying deterministic, how just use the word determined, right? Like for example, some sort of some outcome will be determined by technology alone. But technology by itself cannot be a deciding factor, right? Technology has to be accompanied by regulation. Technology has to fit into a certain social landscape. And then only you can't even predict even then what the specific outcomes of a certain technology are going to be. You have to think about it as a whole. You have to think about your socioeconomic and political realities. Where does technology fit into these political, socio-economic political realities? And then what is your trajectory of change? Now, this would be the center, like 0, 0. This neutral stance that nothing can be determined by itself. Just by knowing what a technology can do, I cannot determine how it will impact a certain section of the population. Now, what are we trying to say in these 4 different terms? Substantivism. Technologies shape society as a whole, meaning technology has such a large impact, significant impact in a way that technology completely is capable of transforming society. That is substantivism. So substantial that it might impact you in a way that only technology is capable of that kind of uh, change and shaping of realities. Instrumentalism is that technologies are tools. Technologies are very much like a hammer. Nobody is going to say that a hammer is capable of transforming society. A hammer is used for nailing on the wall. Why? So if I ask somebody today, a hammer is a tool. A hammer is not something that is going to substantially transform the trajectory of society. So thinking of technology like the hammer, like a screwdriver, like a tool, something that humans must use to bring about certain outcomes. That is instrumentalism. You use it as an instrument, right? Voluntarism. Voluntarism is humans develop technology at their own free will, which means the complete control of how technology should be conceived, designed, and deployed lies with humans. That's the extreme left. Humans completely control the trajectory of how a technology evolves. That's voluntarism. Determinism. Technological development is determined by an inner logic. Something inside the technology itself will decide what its trajectory of change will be. That is determinism. Now, let's look at the statement that we're seeing, right? What are we seeing here? Here it says, ChatGPT will be responsible for changing how we perform surgeries. What is this leaning towards, according to you, amongst the four?
It is determinism, right?
It is determinism because the statement reflects that there is something innate in ChatGPT that will fundamentally change how we do surgeries. But that is not the case. It has to, there will be significant uh, surrounding impact, right? Like your regulation plays a huge role, your humans play a huge role, and all of that is ignored in this statement. This statement suggests that ChatGPT itself, the technology itself, will tell us how it will transform how we do something. Correct? Is that clear to you?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, but what was about determinism? Technological development is determined by an inner logic, right?
It's developed by an inner logic.
Inner logic. So in this case, what is that inner logic when we are talking about this chat GPT, like to perform?
So we're saying that, so what we mean by inner logic is the capabilities and the way that the technology itself is designed will be a determinant of of whether or not it will transform something. Which means, what is the underlying concept there? When someone is deterministic about a certain technology, they're saying that it doesn't matter what situations or what context the technology is deployed in, but the technology will perform. The technology will change things. The technology will transform things. But we have learned that that is not the case. Technology and how it impacts is very much a function of social, cultural, economic, and political contexts that it is set within. It cannot be, I cannot take some technology that works for educating preteens in Delaware in the US and bring it to Bangalore or Delhi or Chennai and say, we're going to apply the same thing and I know it's going to work because this technology works. This technology is going to change how we educate ourselves. Correct? That means you're giving the power to the technology. You're saying the technology by itself is capable of transforming. That's the inner logic part.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah,
Okay.
understood. Yeah.
Okay. If there are no further questions, I think this is a good time to stop. So we can stop streaming this. And if there are any other doubts or examples that you would all like to discuss, I'm happy to take them over the discussion forum, and we will have one more such live session in the coming week. Thank you all for joining.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye. We can end this. Is there someone from NPTEL here?